This is an exercise in social listening where you observe what people are not just saying, but what people are responding to. It's very educational, and I have learned quite a lot from just observing these patterns in the comments. So I don't always have time to respond to the comments, but I do look at them and reflect carefully on what is it that is triggering my audience. Now, my audience is quite diverse, but I guess if they are here and listening to my presentations, they have some degree of concern. And that exactly what number in the population it is, we're not quite sure, but it is a significant chunk. And so, therefore, it is incumbent on the scientific and medical community to understand what are they thinking, what are they saying. So I have just highlighted a few comments and I'll quickly run through them and make a few thoughts as to what exactly people have said. And more importantly, what have the other members of the audience who watched the video and looked at the comments responded to? That's really the big question. So let's get straight into this concept here because it's very, very interesting. So this was from a video I just did. Sudden deaths are rising. Is it real? And it was looking at the reality that there in the age group of 0 to 54, there were still very high levels of deaths, way beyond what would be expected. No clear investigation into it. And here is one of the top comments with 523 likes. And this is what I mean is you can realize, oh boy, this is what everybody's thinking. They are not looking into it because they already know the answer. That's powerful. And this is what I keep saying to people is that if you underestimate what the public is thinking, don't think you can just come up with some story and they'll just randomly go along with it. No, it is really, really a concern to a significant proportion of the population. Some people think that they can ignore them, but they are just as important as everyone else, and you have to address and answer their concerns. This person spoke about her mother dying of a blood clot after two AstraZeneca vaccines. And this may have been vaccine induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia. I'm not quite clear. Her father had a clot in the leg. He's currently in hospital now with a clot in his lungs and micro clots. She's praying she doesn't lose him too. Is it mass psychosis? This is the bit that stood out to me. The doctors sicken me with their silence. Now, it's very, very difficult. And I say this as gently as I can, in that many people somehow expect that doctors will speak out if they have concerns. Now, the truth is, the majority probably don't. Even though strange things are happening, there is a bit of cognitive dissonance where people just can't quite acknowledge what's happening. But even if they did, it comes at great risk. And one of the things that I have observed is that people expect from others what they don't do themselves. So if you expect somebody to speak out and stand up and make a stand for what is right and true, just make sure you are doing that yourself. Don't expect it of others if you don't expect it of yourself. And that's the point that I would make with regards to that. And similarly, somebody else made the point there very similar. The problem will be addressed when doctors stop being cowards. And again, it's tough because I'm in the medical fraternity. But as I said, I talk about these things not because I shouldn't say not because I'm not concerned, or the reason I am speaking about these things and the reason I'm taking on the challenge is because in my view I don't have a choice. I recognize the pathophysiology with regards to autoimmunity. Very few people understand it, and therefore I have a responsibility to raise awareness around it and to be able to use it to predict everything that's coming beyond it. And I don't believe I can stay silent with that kind of knowledge because few people get it. I saw it very early in 2020, and I'm still trying to educate the scientific community that, listen, don't underestimate autoimmunity. It will absolutely decimate the health of the population. We've got to get our heads around it. And so I have no choice in my heart but to keep talking about this. And nobody can challenge the science because it's there. Now, whether they acknowledge it is a different question. But it is not easy to just pick up on something and start speaking about it if you are not very passionate about what it is that you're standing for. But don't expect it from others if it's not something you are doing yourself. The other comment here is the person said here Australian propaganda media said yesterday low birth rates due to high housing prices. We all know it's the safe and effective elephant. I love the elephant in the room concept, and I love this because censorship is so rife at the moment that I had to come up with innovative ways to share the concern. And elephant in the room, I mean, I always have this image here, which I think was the original one that I did, this elephant in the room. I think it captured where we are today, where this elephant is knocking over chairs. You know, you can't even fit in the room. Nobody's acknowledging the elephant, even though clearly something isn't right. It's almost as if they're blind to looking at it, to being able to understand. So that is an example of the kind of thing that I think would be relevant in terms of how we're going to get a change in the near future. I wanted to move on to another one where some of the top comments. So, as I said, we really appreciate the comments, appreciate the fact that people are involved in what is happening and being able to share their perspective. So, the other one that had a lot of attention was to do with the gut microbiome, and it's interesting to see people's perspective on this one here. And this one had much less comments, but it's still relevant to look at here. I'll get that in here. And it was talking about they appreciated the presentation. You can't see all of it, but what is there is very, very valuable. Everybody needs to grasp this issue about the gut microbiome and the impact of it. And this person says, right on the money, love the illustration. It's like poisoning some slowly with arsenic, a little bit in their tea every day, 6 months down the line, and they don't see the connection. How perfectly aligned that is in the last few years. But those with ears and eyes wide shut cannot see or hear it. Gladly, I always did. Much gratitude. And I think that she captured a really important point that I highlight. There is a time lag between the impact and the presentation of symptoms. And whenever you see that, it's like asbestos. Many people were exposed to asbestos, and it took years before they ended up with lung disease. And it was only because of autopsy, and this is why autopsy is so critical. It's when they looked at the lungs and they saw the particles, they realized that the asbestos was the driver for the pathology. And so without autopsy, you'll not know these things. And this is why I push for autopsy to be done, because without autopsy, this could go on for decades with everybody just guessing and going along and nobody quite knowing. Here is a historical reference with regards to thalidomide. And it's not the same thing, but I think the historical reference is relevant. When thalidomide was being used, all these babies were being born with unusual patterns, no arms, no legs, and everybody was like, what's going on? The use of the drug thalidomide at the time was recognized and acknowledged. And they asked the question. They said, well, could it be the thalidomide? And it was answered by the company, and it was said, no, it couldn't be the thalidomide because we have looked at the patients that we gave thalidomide to, and not all of them ended up with these problems. So it's not that. So you have to understand that And the medical community accepted that. It wasn't until an Australian doctor, pushed by his nurse, the midwife, who really looked back at it again and caused it to blow up. But they were prescribing this drug for years. The only reason that the USA wasn't severely affected was because of one scientist in the FDA, and she wasn't pushing back because of the arms and the abnormalities. It was because of a neuropathy. But the point is, because they went on the assumption that everybody's going to be affected. And therefore, if not everybody's affected, it's not relevant. They didn't realize that it was a very specific time frame. It was about a 10-day window where if somebody was taking thalidomide, that was the high risk for these abnormalities to occur. But if they had looked carefully, they would have noticed that every patient who had this was on thalidomide. It's that kind of association. And literally, we're talking about 5 years. And so I don't expect that this necessarily is going to suddenly resolve because autopsies are not being done. That's why I'm pushing for autopsies, because I know without it, we're not going to get any answers, any relevant answers about what is going on. Um, I wanted to highlight as well another video here. And this one here is about the recent death of Alex Salmon. What is behind the tragedies? Because again, if you look at it, you will see the stories that people are telling. So look at this one here. This comment got really significant amount of likes from it. Like that as well. And I'll bring up the Alex Salmon thing here. So this was talking about a 36-year-old teacher at a local school who had job mandates, passed away after being diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He was a gym teacher and all-star athlete, then a 43-year-old mother of two and a news director at a television station, dropped dead just weeks before last. A co-worker dropped dead of a brain bleed 2 weeks after. My mother died of a superior cancer diagnosed. And you can see now the fact that this has gotten so many likes means that so many people resonate with that story. That's pretty serious. And here is what's happening. I haven't spoken recently about cancer and the surge in cancer. Now, a lot of people will tell you that there is not a significant rise in cancer. And they've changed the way that they measure it and they model it and so on. But I think that there is a critical thing that is not being acknowledged. And the critical thing that is not being acknowledged is that it's not just that people are getting cancer, it's that they are getting or presenting with stage 4 cancer. Now, that's very different. Normally, people will, this is the reason we screen. You have the colonoscopies, you have the mammograms, you're screened so that if we can catch cancer before it spreads. But what we are seeing these days is that patients are presenting with metastatic cancer as the first presentation. You can't do anything about that. That is a very serious trajectory. And what I'm saying is that when you look at the comments, this is happening all over the place. So clearly, a lot of people are similarly noticing that. This person, Sarah, same thing. I had two relatives, both vaxxed, previously healthy, develop aggressive cancer, and within the next 12 months, both died. I'm the only one in my entire extended family that didn't get the concoctions. My mother keeps getting the latest boosters. She has had it 5 times with occurring bladder infections and all kinds of things going on. Now, what's happening is that a lot of people will look at that and say that's anecdotal. That's just one person. And it's true. But when you look at the comments and the likes associated with it, you realize that a lot of people are seeing very similar patterns. It's almost as if what you've seen with your eyes and you're hearing with the ears, whatever you are thinking is abnormal is being discounted from the perspective that there doesn't seem to be any data. The reality is that this trajectory is not going to go away. I've explained to people before, many people are blaming the elephant in the room. And I keep on saying that, yeah, maybe that could have caused some issues, but it wouldn't be causing what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now with regards to the broad spectrum of disease is a combination of two things. The fact that the immune system is primed and the fact that the immune system is continually re-exposed to this very, very dangerous virus. The two together is what I call the COVID storm. And when that happens, it's the epoxy residue. I think I have that image because it's such an important image to capture. This is it here. This is effectively how I look at where we are today. That immune priming with recurring infection, when they meet in the middle, is the storm that we're seeing. The longer it takes to acknowledge this and address this, the harder it will be for anything to be done. The horse may have already bolted, and who is going to be affected has already been affected. But I do think that there is still an opportunity to mitigate people who may have more resilient immune systems. And down the line, because what we are seeing is almost, if you were going to have issues 20 years down the line, you may have reduced that between 5 to 10 years. The question is, can that be undone? Where it's no longer just 5 to 10 years, maybe we can push it 12 to 15 if the issues are identified and addressed. These are some challenging times, and all we can do at the moment is continue to discuss and hope that our concerns get raised at the highest levels. At the moment, politicians still seem to be enthralled by the financial benefits from going along with the narrative. In the long run, we can only hope that maybe these things go away. And it's turned out in another couple of years, everyone is laughing. I was concerned, nothing happened. I am willing to take that hit. But until that is addressed and until we have some answers, I will continue to ask questions. Have a great evening.